Welcome to the Friday edition of the Southeastern 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Barry Allen joins me as he always does. We've got a special guest today, though. He's Gene Morgan. He was one of the pitchers on Mississippi State's baseball team back during one of the best eras for that program that it's ever had, maybe the best. Played with a lot of famous guys on that team. Gene, I'm just going to let you take it from here to tell folks who you are, when you played, and just give us some background before we start the podcast today.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, it's kind of a strange story of how I got to Mississippi State because, back then there was no internet. You didn't have, 100 different ways to be seen. And so I went to Middle Georgia Junior College, which at that point was a really great program of going to the World Series. We did go to the World Series in '83. Came in second, and it was Robert Sapp was the coach, and I was going around doing tryouts, and I got a call from Coach Sapp that I was could go on a recruiting trip to Mississippi State, and I'm like, Mississippi State, never heard of it. But Sapp had coached under Polk at Georgia Southern, so I went up there on my recruiting trip as a referral from Coach Sapp, and I get into the airport in Columbus, and I'm looking for some, tall, just athletic-looking guy, and this short guy with his hair greased back. He had a polka dot hunter green and beige polyester shirt on, green polyester pants, and those patent leather green and beige shoes. I looked past him for who I thought was a coach, and he walked up to me, introduces himself as Ron Polk. And my first thought was, what did I get myself into? And so we go on a recruiting trip. We drive into Starkville, and the place is dead as nails. And nobody's there, no games, no football, baseball, basketball, soccer, anything. So he takes me around and introduces me to the football coach, the basketball coach, and some townspeople. And there was a difference. These people were genuinely kind, they genuinely loved their baseball program. And I just fell in love with the play and told Coach Polk that I'd love to go there. And then went and played in '84. I was there for the '84 season, and of course the '85 season. And it was best decision I could have ever made.
Gene, Mississippi State had some just great teams when you played. That program has been consistently great for a long time, and we're going to get into some more things with your career here in a minute. But your alma mater is back in the College World Series again. You know how much baseball means to that town and to the people on that campus. What would it mean if State were to break through this year and win a national title?
God, there's so many answers to that question. It would be phenomenal because I know every single campus, every single town thinks that they're behind their baseball program. But, Mississippi State hasn't been successful consistently like a lot of the programs that do make it to the World Series. So I guess it's kind of like Cubby fans or the Cleveland Browns fans. It's like they're just going to stick with you through thick and thin. They love their baseball program, win or lose. I think it would mean a lot to the kids playing and the coaches, but I cannot imagine it being more exciting than it would be to the townspeople because they support that program with their time, their money, their cheers, and just I can't imagine a bigger thing that would happen in Starkville than for them to break through and win that thing.
Gene, let's talk about the era there of 83, 84, 85, three dominant Mississippi State teams. A couple of freshmen come in '83, Will Clark, Rafael Palmeiro, kind of changed the landscape of SEC baseball. Recruiting, bringing guys in. State fell short in '83. Went to Texas in '83, lost 2 games to Texas on Sunday, kept them out of the World Series. Group came in as sophomores. You're there now in '84. Lost to South Carolina at home in the first game of a regional. Came back through, but lost in the finals to New Orleans. So 2 years in a row, one game short of Omaha, and now here's 1985. What are you guys thinking going into the 1985 season? As you were close at '83 and close at '84, what's the thought of this team going into the '85 season?
Well, going through fall workouts, you could tell that there was a different vibe. I've thought about this many times. It's hard to explain, but it's like a calm came over us. It wasn't like, the last 2 years we didn't make it. We got to do this. We've got to do that. It was spring workouts were great. We had some good solid pitching and good hitting behind the Clark and Palmero, especially in front. With Van Cleve. But going into the season, I think we started 15-0 or something like that. And we didn't plan that. Nobody can plan for that. But we just gained confidence, and it's like every game we went into, even if it was late in the game, had many come from behind victories in the last 2 to 3 innings, and we never thought we were out of the game. We had a little bit of a skid when we came back from Hawaii, and really put us in a tight situation there at the end of the season. And I believe Auburn had to lose for us to even make it into the SEC tournament. And then we went through the SEC tournament, the regionals, made it to the World Series. But I guess if I could put it on one word, is we were just calm and played our game.
Gene, I want to ask you about that team that you played on, because, boy, you can probably count on one hand, maybe one finger, how many college baseball teams where you can remember the names that one had. I wasn't following it at the time, but I watched Jeff Brantley and Bobby Thigpen in the big leagues. Thigpen held the single season saves record with the White Sox for a spell. Rafael Palmeiro, everybody knows that story, at over 500 home runs, over 3,000 hits. And Will Clark, frankly, was maybe the most underrated player of the 80s and 90s. Frankly, I thought that guy should have gotten more attention for the Hall of Fame than he did. But what was it like playing with those guys? Did you know these guys were going to be as great as they turned out to be? I think with Clark and Palmeiro, that was evident. But I just want to hear your stories about playing with that bunch, and especially you're the guy I'm sure had to pitch to Palmeiro and Clark in batting practice, and things, not in batting practice, but in scrimmages and things. And I'm just wondering what that experience was like to play with those guys, and certainly to pitch to those two who are two of the all-time greats who've ever come through this league.
Well, that's a great question. And you can ask anybody. When you're playing with somebody at the current time, you can tell that they've got the it factor, that, they're skilled. But you've seen a lot of guys go into the pros that have skills and struggle. Maybe they struggle for a while. I'm having a brain cramp right here, but the Cooper Jones. Yeah, he struggled his first several years in pro ball, and of course he didn't have the college experience. But you never know. You can say, yeah, they're going to have a great career, but you don't know. But what you do know is at that point in time, we had 7 guys drafted off that team, and 5 made it to the big leagues. You know that they've got something that other guys don't have, and just sit back and watch them, especially in batting practice. I used to love to watch Clark hit, because he would take the ball wherever it was pitched. He didn't try to slam everything. To him, a single was just as good as a home run, and you could tell him using all fields that he was going to do well going forward. Palmero, front foot hitter, pull hitter, didn't go opposite field very often, but when he hit the ball, it was a bullet. And of course, Brantley, he and I were always working out together, and you could tell he had something that Clark also had, was that intensity for the game. It was a drive. It was a focus that on game day, you didn't talk to Jeff. JB, you don't go up to him, start talking about what you're going to do that weekend. He's focused. He was a professional before he ever signed a professional contract. So playing with those guys, it's just it was a blast. Not only was it fun, it was educational watching those guys play. So it's a great question. Again, another hard question to answer to put in a nutshell, but I still look back on that 84, 85 time that I had there at Starkville with so much love, and I just am glad I had a chance to be a part of it because it was something that I've carried with me for the past 36 years.
Gene, I know Jeff real well. Cowboys, us Reds fans affectionately call him, and his work with the Reds on the radio. And I mean, this guy's, as you mentioned, was a professional even when he was, playing, at Mississippi State. He's from Hoover, went to Berry High School, won a state championship football and baseball. He brought that mentality with him. You were a junior college World Series participant at Middle Georgia. And for our audience, when you said you played for Coach Robert Sapp, who later became head coach at Georgia, and for those of us who are old and remember the history of baseball prior to the 90s or whatever, Robert Sapp replaced Barry Schallenberger as the head coach at Middle Georgia, who became the head coach at Alabama and won the SEC in 1983 with David Magadan. So a good history with your program at Middle Georgia. Now you're here at Mississippi State. You've got Brantley, who's been a winner where he's been, and these two electric guys, Clark and Palmero. Did you guys before the '85 season sit down at all and talk about? I mean, you were close in '84. They've been close '83 and '84. Did y'all talk about, hey, what do we got to do to, to finally break through and get to Omaha? And was that conversation, or was it just business as usual for the Bulldogs every day?
I've never been asked that question. And if there was a group of them that got together, I was not included. But I never heard of any talk or any chatter of putting the cart before the horse in that way. And I think that's why we were so focused, is that we were saying, what can we do to be better today and tomorrow? What can we do to get better for the next game? And it's such a cliche, but I mean, even being a cliche, if you don't do it, then you end up putting the cart before the horse. And we never did that. We always prepared for the next series, and even when we got through the SEC tournament and the regional into the World Series, I mean, I remember before a couple of days before Oklahoma State, Coach Mag had a videotape of just one of their games. And I remember sitting in the hotel room, guys were out there playing pool and mini golf and swimming, whatever. I'm watching that video, and I rewind that watch. I watch their swing, and the hitters, they were watching the pitcher in case they faced that one or two pitchers that pitched that game. So we were focused on the next game, and I think that was part of the reason why we were so successful, is that we trained, we practiced, and we studied for the next game. I know a lot of teams that have, consistently great teams. They go, yeah, what do we got to do to get to the World Series this year? If they did that, like I said, I wasn't part of it.
And not as easy let me back up there. It's never easy to get to Omaha, but it was certainly a more difficult path when you played than it is now, because there were not as many teams, and the SEC hadn't quite gotten to that level that it is right now in college baseball. I mean, Alabama played for the national title in '83, lost to Texas, who knocked Mississippi State out in the Austin Regional, but still haven't quite gotten there yet. Mississippi State finishes second in the West that year behind LSU, goes to the SEC tournament, wins the SEC tournament, gets the automatic bid as the SEC champion to the NCAA tournament, and hosts the regional at home, and hosts a really good regional at home in Starkville. The teams the teams there are a lot. There we go. Mississippi State hosting West Virginia, New Orleans, Michigan. In that regional, Michigan had Barry Larkin on that team. Michigan had been to Omaha in '83 and played against Alabama and Texas and teams in '83. Mississippi State beats West Virginia, beats UNO, then loses to Michigan in the first game, but then comes back and beats Michigan 19-8 in '85 to win that regional and go to Omaha. Just talk about that regional. Do you remember Larkin being with Michigan? Do you remember anything about that regional that sticks out? I know it was packed. I've seen photos of it. I know it was a crazy atmosphere. It's always crazy over there, but it seemed like that one was the crazy of the crazy for that year anyway.
It was so packed. It's almost like there wasn't enough oxygen in the area. They were 8-10 deep down the lines. I had heard of, I can't remember if it was 10,000+ or 14,000+, but you couldn't see a blade of grass anywhere. It was packed. I do remember Barry Larkin. I remember, us talking about, him, and he's going to be, he'll be drafted very, very high in that year's draft. And I remember us losing that first game. So it was do or die. And it's just like somebody flipped a switch. It's like, okay, hey, we got to go out there and work. We got to do our job. And we pounded the ball. It's like, didn't matter who they threw at us. I think we had like 22 hits or something like that. It was fun to watch. I wasn't part of that game, and it was just, about halfway through the game, the atmosphere in the dugout was just one of, okay, let's keep pounding away and get this game over and get on a plane to Omaha.
And for our
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So for our fans that are listening, this is not the Duty Noble Field, Polk Dement Stadium that we all know and love today. This was about as primitive could be. I remember the old chicken coop press box that they had, and I mean there were a few bleachers and there were a lot of people standing. I mean this may have been the start of the craziness of Mississippi State baseball. It was a fantastic atmosphere over there that day. I wasn't there, but I've heard people that talk about it. I mean, you can envision what they played in this weekend against Notre Dame. This place was nothing like this. I mean, it's literally just fields and fields of grass and fences, and the atmosphere had to be crazy. And I know UNO and Michigan and West Virginia have never seen anything like that before, probably even or since.
No, as a matter of fact, I think that the seating capacity, like bleachers wise, was either 2,200 or 3,200, but it was like, I think it was closer to 3,200. So for seats, that was the max. But then you count the left field line, the left field lounge, out through center field and right field, and down the right field line. That's where we had our batting cages. So there really wasn't a whole lot of place. And a lot of room. But then back behind the right field fence, kind of goes up into a hill into some trees. So it wasn't like it was wide open to just stand up there and watch. People were, I mean, when I say you couldn't see a blade of grass, I mean, people were touching. I mean, it's like you were being touched on all sides. And I remember if you wanted to go to the clubhouse, it was in the Coliseum. So you had to walk across that little parking lot there. And I remember coming back and looking and going, these people can't even see. The only thing that they can see is if the ball goes up in the air, but they were there having as much fun as somebody that's sitting right behind the plate. There was a beautiful, beautiful atmosphere to be in. It was, things like that you don't take in when it's happening, but when you look back and go, man, where did all these people come from? There can't be a shop in town that's open. And it may not have been. But it was electrifying. So when you ask about memories, I remember that as much as I do winning.
Well, you were a huge
Okay, go ahead.
You go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying I'm a rambler. I can talk all day long, so you just have to interrupt me when you.
I
when you
don't.
hear me.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I like your stories. I think they're fun and they're good. But you're talking about your winning. You're still on the top 10 winning percentages in Mississippi State history. I mean, you and Brantley on the same staff. Y'all combined for 65 wins in your career, and still both of you in the top 10 all time in winning percentage at Mississippi State. So now you guys have gotten through the regional, and now you go to Omaha, where it's a star-studded field: Arkansas, South Carolina, Oklahoma State, Miami, Stanford, Texas, and Arizona. Arkansas not in the SEC at the time. Neither was South Carolina. Arkansas won the first game 1-0 in 14 innings with Jeff King on that team. So Mississippi State knocks off Oklahoma State. Then you come back in game 2. You beat Arkansas 5-4. They have Jeff King on their team. Oklahoma State had a young Pete Incaviglia, the veteran Doug DeCenzo. Now we get to June the 7th, and it's Mississippi State and Texas in the undefeated game in the College World Series, and Gene Morgan is on the mound, and he is giving Texas fits. And then, of course, as we all know, I'll let you tell the story of what you were feeling as the game was going along, but the line drive that came back and struck you in the leg, you weren't the same. It did affect you. It affected your ball club. Texas ends up coming back and winning, and then Mississippi State goes out the next day, losing to Miami. But what are you feeling in this Texas game? You're up, I think it's 4-0 on Texas in the 5th inning. You're cruising along. Is your thoughts going into this game, what you're feeling at this point, and then take me through the line drive and what happened after that.
Yeah. Excuse me. I was actually a little more, I don't say worried, because you can't pitch with a negative thought mentality, but I was concerned more for Texas because they were not a power hitting team. Power hitting team with a tailing fastball, changeup in a slider, I was able to kind of keep them at bay. But a team that is a singles, doubles, triples, and occasional home run team, they're more apt to hit me than a power hitting team. So I was a little more concerned. I studied just as hard for them as I did for Oklahoma State. And again, I had one game to look at. But yeah, I was actually kind of surprised that they kept trying to pull me, and there was one guy that didn't, and that was Cook, the right fielder, who actually went to the big leagues as a pitcher. Dennis Cook, that's his name. He went off field with me for 2 or 3 hits. I think I walked him twice and he got 2 hits off the field. Could not get him out. So yeah, I got there and in the 5th, and I don't remember what pitch it was, but I had one. I was going for the outside corner, and it kind of tailed over to the middle out third of the plate, and he crushed it. He hit it so hard I didn't have time to get my glove down, and it ricocheted off the inside ankle bone and rolled out to Rafi in left field. And I got up and I was walking around. Excuse me. And it was sore. It hurt, but it was hurt. It hurt where it hit, but it didn't hurt to walk. So I'm like, okay, maybe it didn't do anything. So they put the freeze ethyl chloride or whatever it's called on there, and it was tender. It was sore, but since it hit directly on the bone instead of on muscle, there was no damage. It was just sore. And by the time I finished that inning and got back into the dugout, they didn't even put any ice on it. And so I got the next inning, and I got back in my groove. I got out of the inning, got out of that inning, and then in the next inning, I got the first 2 out, and then back to back opposite field doubles, and they scored a couple of runs. And then the following inning, if you go back and watch it, I still had good location, maybe not as much velocity, which it's hard for me to hit 80, 86, 87 anyway. But they had a couple of hits, a bunt that I thought was out at first. They had a couple of T&I hits, and then the killer was bases loaded, one out, and a routine ground ball to Frank Davis at short that took a bad hop and got by him, and then the floodgates opened. So my theory, the way I feel about it, is that once I did get hit, I did get out of the inning, Texas, which is a momentum team if there ever is one, they can be down 10 runs and just turn on the mojo. They've done it for decades. I think that their confidence got up and they started hitting the ball in that last inning, and the rest is history. But people don't believe me when I tell them that after I got back to the dugout and went out the next inning, I didn't even notice my ankle. It was to get out of that fifth inning. It was on my mind, so I got a lot of pitches up. I walked the first hitter, and the balls were up, and I got fortunate. We got a double play and a strikeout. But the next inning, if you look, my balls are down. It's moving, breaking ball sharp. But Texas just, after that bad hop to Frank, they just flipped the switch, and they weren't going to be stopped.
So the next day after things went awry for you guys in against Texas, now instead of a couple of days off, waiting on the Texas-Miami winners, the way the bracket's set up, now you got to come back the next day and play Miami. Jeff Brantley on shorter rest than normal, and a stifling hot day, as looks like some of the days are going to be like that in Omaha this year. Brutally hot day, and the Bulldog gives you what he's got, and you can't complete the game. And I remember Thigpen coming in and giving up the walk-off home run to Greg Elena in Miami and ending the season there. I mean, just talk about that, the way the season ended, and what's going through you guys' mind as this is the final game that this group's going to play together.
Oh, that was a tough. I mean, yeah, over the years I've tried to find a correlation, and I can't. It's just like how quickly in life in general, but in sports, you could be up so darn high and then so darn low a minute later. I mean, we were like thinking, hit that grand slam, and just like, have a few days off. We get ready to play in the final series, and not series back then, but play for the championship, and it was over. When he hit the ball, I didn't think it was going to be gone when he hit it, but out there in that air, the ball just travels, and when I saw both Van Cleve and Rafi just go from a sprint to almost a dead stop, I just hung my head. I looked around the dugout, and everybody was there with their mouths wide open. It was unbelievable. It's impossible to explain how disappointing it was.
Let's fast forward 36 years to this weekend. Mississippi State and Texas are going to get together again in Omaha. First time since 1985 they've played in Omaha. Texas knocks Mississippi State out of the regional in 83, wins the games in 85. How significant is this game? I don't know that Chris Lemonis and the team are thinking in these terms, but how significant is this game Sunday night for Mississippi State former players, alumni, and fans that follow this program? How big a game is this to maybe try to go the Red Sox a little bit and reverse the curse, perhaps, maybe? How big of a game is this for the program?
You want me to answer honestly? You want the truth, or you want me to say what everybody wants to hear? Hey, to the guys, it's another game. To the coaches, the players, it's another game. None of them were there for the Texas game. It wouldn't matter if it was Texas, Oklahoma, or some high school team. To the players and coaches, they got to win. They may think about it. They've been told about it. They say, yeah, but we're a different team, different era. The fans, completely different story. To us, as on the outside looking in, we're like, we got to make up for 85. We are going to put it to these guys, and we are going to love it. And so I think it's going to be a heck of a lot more fun for the fans, and they'll get more joy out of winning, and probably more sadness if we lose. But to the guys and the players and the coaches, it's just a game they got to win.
Last question, Gene, and this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time and your honesty in this morning and reminiscing with me. What most of us listening and those of us asking the questions today, you're the only one that can answer this. What does it really mean to put on the maroon jersey or the white jersey and play at a SEC baseball program that has so much tradition and history like Mississippi State?
I'm going to answer it in two parts. One is, since I didn't grow up in the area following the Bulldogs, I followed different Bulldogs, and so I didn't know about the tradition. Everybody's got tradition, but I didn't know about Mississippi State baseball tradition. Even in my junior year when I was playing, I said, what do you think about the State-Ole Miss rivalry? Well, I don't know about it. You talk about, Tech Georgia, that's a rivalry. Tech Auburn, Georgia Auburn, that's a rivalry. Georgia Florida, that's definitely a rivalry. But I didn't look at it as that kind of a rivalry. I'm excited about it. But going forward, again, you don't know how things are going to turn out when you're there. I think that Mississippi State has proved over the years that they probably not too much longer are going to be out of the mouths of people, of sportscasters and analysts in the top 10 every year. So I'm looking forward to hearing how the Bulldogs see and how the Bulldogs do going forward.
Gene, we appreciate your time today. Catch people up on where you are with your life. I know you played minor league ball for a while. Just tell folks about what you're doing these days and anything of interest to people as we close the podcast today.
Oh, yeah. I've been in different types of sales, mainly telecommunications sales since I got out. I had one class to finish when I left in '85 and played 2.5 years of minor league. But after that, I did go back and get that class. So I do have my degree from Mississippi State. So that's always good. I just want to address one thing on that last question. When I put on the uniform at Mississippi State again, that's then, you enjoy it, the fans, the program, everything. But to me, when they invited us back to be recognized at the Arkansas football game back in, I guess it was 2015, 14 or 15, I can't remember, to put on that number 40 and walk out on the field, that was special. That, 30 years later, they still love the old guys coming back after 30 years of at Mississippi State baseball. So I do appreciate that. But I'm living in Atlanta, actually in a little town called Bethlehem, Georgia, in Gwinnett County. Just working towards retirement and being able to do a lot more fishing than I get to do right now.
Sounds like a good life. Gene, this has been a great episode today. A slice of college baseball history that some of our audience is aware of, maybe some not. It was fun listening to the stories. Again, that was before my time, but Anyway, God bless you. Thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate you being a part of our podcast.
Yeah, anytime. I've done a couple of these, and it really warms my heart that 36 years later, we're still part of your memories, and that it's going to sound so corny, but that's a beautiful thing. It really is. That it's not just 85; it's every year. I'm sure there's a lot of fans that can name at least 10 players on every single team that they've ever watched, maybe more, probably more. And I don't know that there's another program in the country that can say that. I mean, the players are available; they get to know them personally, and that's what creates that atmosphere. The atmosphere at Mississippi State. I said at the beginning that the people in Mississippi were genuinely kind. They weren't being nice because I was being recruited for the baseball team. They genuinely, Coach Poe could have walked me in there as some kid found on the street. Hey, I want to buy a meal for him. They would have been just as friendly, just as kind. And I think that is at the core of the reason that Mississippi baseball has such a cool following. Anyway, I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak, and I will be with you following the Bulldogs through the College World Series, and maybe we will get that one and hang it on the wall.
Well, these are the things that make SEC baseball special, the stories, the tradition, the history, the passion. And we will be back next week to cover all that. There's a lot of baseball to come in the next few days. We'll be back with the podcast next week. Anyway, we thank Gene Morgan, former Mississippi State baseball player, for joining us today. Thank you to my co-host, Barry Allen. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Thank you for listening to the 14. Remember, we will have lots of content coming up at the website. That is southeastern14.com. You can follow us on Twitter at 14 Southeastern. And, of course, you can get us where you get your podcasts. Just search Southeastern 14 or the 14. Leave us a nice review and rating. That always helps us get noticed. Anyway, I'm Chris Lee. Have a great weekend. We will see you back here Monday on the 14.